Hey listeners, if you like this podcast, check out our other shows, The Study Table and Training Table. Listen to archived content and in-depth interviews with insiders working with student athletes. It's on our website, www.fredopie.com. Welcome to The Dinner Table, a discussion with food as a lens into cultures and societies. I'm your host, Fredopie.
He was used to cooking for hundreds of people. So at home, he'd never follow a recipe. He would just throw things together. And it still amazes me, the stuff that he would come up with. And it tasted so amazingly good. It was kind of a little bit of this and a little bit of that. His tenderloin of beef with Yorkshire pudding, unbelievable. Au jus gravy, so good. His fried chicken with mashed potatoes and country gravy was one of my favorites. He loved Southern cooking. He loved grits and collard greens. He loved all the Southern kind of stuff. He was great with different kinds of fishes. The barbecue ribs were one of the things that we ate nearly all the time. Okay. They were fabulous. And then he was good with stuff like tacos, too. He was good with everything.
What role does food play on a college campus? We look at that question today through the lens of the life of Babson College's former head chef, Dick Roussel. Babson College is a small business school some 25 minutes outside of Boston. Chef Dick Roussel started working at Babson in the late 1960s. He retired after working at the college for 25 years. He did more than make meals for the college campus. He mentored his staff and the students within his sphere. He also served as a faculty advisor to one of the campus fraternities. His food raised the campus morale, similar to how a successful athletic team gives its fan base a feeling of pride. A French Canadian, Dick Roussel grew up in Nashua, New Hampshire. His daughter Vicky Roussel on the city's French Canadian migrant community and her family history.
My dad grew up in Nashua, New Hampshire. He's French Canadian. There are tons of French Canadians in Nashua. Maybe because it was further north than some other places and because it was a city and also because the factories were there, so it was a place to work. His parents came from Canada and they moved to Nashua. They got married and I think they had him maybe 9 months later. He had a sister, Dorothy, and younger brother, Earl. They all went to school together in Nashua. My grandmother, she divorced my grandfather when the kids were very young. I guess he was kind of a womanizer. So she was a single mom of 3 children way back when. And she worked in one of the shoe factories in Nashua and took care of my father. And they spoke French at home. When my aunt was still alive, he would speak French with her over the phone. And he would speak French with my grandmother. And occasionally he'd call a friend from Nashua and they would speak French. All of his life, my father had terrible eyesight. He wore glasses all of his life, even when he was much younger. He was in the Korean War, and when he signed up for the war, after his physical, they determined that he couldn't fight because he couldn't see that well. The job that they came up with for him was to be a chef. So he started his career in the Army. He never thought that he wanted to cook. But he's always been kind of like, yeah, okay, I'll try that. And so he tried it, and he's been cooking ever since. When he got out of the Army, he was stationed in North Carolina, and then somewhere near Watertown, New York, in the middle of nowhere. And that's where he ended up meeting my mother. I think he must have been cooking at a restaurant there. After my parents were married, they moved around a little bit. I was born in Moline, Illinois, so he was cooking in Illinois. He cooked for a couple of the larger restaurants, and he had some very good training all along the years. Every place he went, he sort of brought what he learned with him. And then I think it all started to flourish at Babson.
And there were classes 5.5 days a week. Saturday morning, because it was a 3-year program. It was also a mandatory sport coat and tie. You could wear jeans, but it was sport coat and tie.
Dan Wright.
Edsel was there at one point, Edsel Ford, as of the son of the Ford family. He had one of the most unique Mustangs on campus. It was a relatively well-heeled group, as I'm sure it still is.
Again, Dick Roussel.
I'm not really sure what brought him here. I think he really liked the idea of working at a college. I have his yearbooks from Babson all the way from when he started. It looked like a pretty wild time at Babson in the 60s and the 70s.
Again, Dan Wright.
I mean, I remember, it was Chuck Berry. We had Vanilla Fudge going back to, another era of psychedelic. But Vanilla Fudge was there within less than a year after their hit, their number one. They were there. Chuck Berry, Mitch Ryder, the Detroit Wheels.
Roussel arrived on the campus around the late 1960s. JR, aka Kurt Pinto, a native of Wellesley, Massachusetts, started working around the same time that Dick Roussel arrived on the scene. JR attended Wellesley High School and worked in the kitchen and Trim cafeteria washing dishes. He worked in Trim's kitchen from the 1960s, working his way up through the ranks, and eventually decided to attend culinary school and become a chef. He worked at Trim for over 25 years. He has detailed memories of his mentor, Dick Roussel, who he calls an old school chef.
Vibrant is a good way. He was very excitable, crazy, go-get-it personality. Not a big guy, regular size, balding, gray, like the New York Yankees. Always wore a New York Yankee jacket. Dick was a traditional old chef, and back then, if you screwed up, you learned. You learned a lot. It wasn't polite. It wasn't very nice, but he taught you quick. It was rough on someone who didn't know what they were doing. They didn't no formal training. Did something wrong, the chef would scream and yell, and he might even throw things. Projected his voice, in a kitchen. Like I said, that old-time chef was, you were afraid of them. And they could hound you if you weren't pulling your weight. But as soon as he saw that, and any of them, I think, as soon as they saw that you were pulling your weight and you were learning and you were willing to work, that's all they wanted, was someone who would work with them. Once they figured that out, you were their best friend. You couldn't do anything wrong. I mean, you could still do things wrong, but they would back you up. Mm-hmm. They were right there for you all the time.
The old way that kitchens were run were very much like the military. Is that accurate?
Yes, it was to some extent. There was the discipline. There was great kitchens need great organization anyway. They don't run well. So there's great organization. Military has that. There's discipline. Military has that. It's just one rank. There's that chef, and that's everybody else is nobody. Other rank, Yes, I can see that. The ones like Dick who know what's going on. You ever want to say know everything because you want to learn something new every day. But the guys who knew the kind of amount of volume of culinary knowledge that Dick had, they share like crazy. And they don't share with necessarily everyone. They wait, they see, they teach you something, they make sure you learn it. They see that you have the ability to learn it and that you're going to do it, and you're going to, like I said, work is really important. They need people. They need 3 or 4 key people who have the knowledge to be able to understand what we're doing, all the little pieces. Once they have, and that they're willing to work hard all day long, give them all the information they need because you need them. You can't do this alone. Dick couldn't do it alone. And when he found guys, there was a couple of great guys when I was coming up that, once we knew it, he could get out of here and be happy that everything was going to be great at dinner time. Because he knew he had those people. So if you don't share it, you're shooting yourself in the foot, and you probably don't know it. He treated people based on their willingness to work. He didn't care if you were a woman or a man. There was no bias against anyone, other than, if you want to work with me, I'm going to take good care of you. If you don't want to work with me, just go away. We don't need that here. You're just taking up space.
In history, people said that the 2 most egalitarian institutions were pirate ships, where you got to be the captain based on your effort and your ability. It had nothing to do with who you knew.
Right.
Same thing with Maroons. If you want one of these runaway communities, whoever was the toughest, the baddest, and the smartest, you could be leader. So you had women that would actually lead some of these Maroon communities.
Yeah.
It sounds to me that in many ways that's how Dick ran his kitchen. It was about hard work and ability, not who you know, and not whether you wore pants or a skirt.
Right, exactly. And part of that in those communities that you're talking about is survival. If you took some schmuck and made him the captain of your pirate ship, guess what's happening to you guys? All he is, right? Same thing with Dick. If he didn't have those, take the best people and make them be the ones that came along with him and ran this show, then his kitchen's going down. It's not easy to make it happen every breakfast, every lunch, every dinner, every day. It takes some planning in it. So you need those people. As a leader, look for those people who want to work hard, because you're not going to take those people sitting down on their butts and make them want to work hard. Those guys, doesn't matter how smart they are or how much they know about food, as long as they want to work hard, they can help you. That's a good thing I learned from Dick.
When Dick Roussel ran the kitchen in Trim, he hired Babson work-study students as part of his staff. Work-study jobs go to students who qualify for financial aid on a college campus. The financial aid office pays them for work done on campus during the academic year. As an aside, as an undergraduate student, I worked with my college's grounds crew raking leaves in the fall and shoveling snow in the wintertime. Chris Brown had been a Babson student in the late 1970s, and he had a work-study job in Trim. Advancement in the kitchen under Dick Roussel depended on one's work ethic and aptitude for learning cooking skills. Chris Brown recalls his experience working with Dick.
I started right out from my freshman year working at Trim. Back then, a lot of students worked there. It was mostly student-driven. So I knew Dick from the minute I started Babson, really. Back then, he was a feared commodity, particularly with management in Trim Dining Hall. Everyone highly respected him and didn't want to cross him at all. But he and I always hit it off very well. And then through probably work ethic, quickly I all of a sudden was helping both serving line and other places, and then at times even helping him in the kitchen or helping with some task out back. Just all grew from there.
He had this massive bookshelf with cookbooks galore back from, the 50s, the 60s, all the way up to the most recent. And he read food magazines. He was always flipping through cookbooks. He never followed a recipe exactly, but he was always flipping through cookbooks. And he was like a librarian. He could go to this massive shelf and say, I'm looking for this, and he'd pick it out. Didn't look organized to me, but it was. And for Christmas, he would always give me a cookbook, and it was always a really good one, too. I have my own little shelf in the kitchen of my cookbooks, and almost all of them were given to me by my dad, and they're all really good. And all of his old ones I still have as well.
Dick Roussel's daughter and Babson alumni, Vicky Roussel.
He was used to cooking for hundreds of people. So at home, he'd never follow a recipe. He would just throw things together. And it still amazes me, the stuff that he would come up with. And it tasted so amazingly good. His fried chicken with mashed potatoes and country gravy was one of my favorites. He loved Southern cooking. He loved grits and collard greens. He loved all the Southern kind of stuff. The barbecue ribs were one of the things that we ate nearly all the time. Okay. They were fabulous.
Vicky Roussel on her dad's cooking at home. Her father introduced a simple but coveted clam chowder recipe to the Babson College community. After his retirement from Babson, many chefs who replaced him tried to remove the recipe from the menu. However, they heard an earful of complaints from students. Here's JR again on the clam chowder recipe and Dick's famous marinara sauce used on pasta dishes and pizza.
The number one, and it's the funniest thing, is that clam chowder that we still serve here at Babson today. There's been times over the years where different managers or different people have gotten involved and wanted to change the menu. And they've taken clam chowder off of Friday at Babson, and boy, do we get trouble. There's nothing special about it. It's a very basic, traditional New England clam chowder. When you do things right, you end up with a great product. Heavy cream, creamy, buttery flavor. It's really, there's probably 6, 7 ingredients. Let's see, there's clams, there's clam broth, or clam juice you can use is fine. And there's heavy cream, there's potatoes. You want to add as you go. If you think you need it, you can. Clams are very salty. The clam broth can be very salty, so put that in later. Black pepper, a little thyme. Start with the onions in the bottom of the pot and let them get almost a little color. Just put a little bit of butter in the bottom and real color on them, but you get them translucent, and they cook down a little bit, and then you can start to add the rest of your ingredients in, and the cream goes last. Oh, and I didn't think about a roux. At the end, you see about its thickness, and you can make a roux, which is just butter and flour cooked together for 5 or 10 minutes. So it has a nutty flavor. Cook that raw flour taste out, and add that at the very end, and stir it well so you don't get any clumps. Stir it as it's going in, and just check the thickness. You're done. I think those old recipes, the reason that people will go crazy if you change that, old simple recipes are still around because they're good. Old recipes that aren't good, you don't see them anymore. You've never heard of them, and they're gone. And the new recipes, you'll see them come and go, and they're just not like the basics, which make you say, wow, this is clam chowder. Babson doesn't have a lot of classes on Fridays. I remember one time we tried to take omelets off of Friday lunch. Lunchtime, you don't normally serve omelets, and we had done it for a bunch of years because we know about the classes that they wake up late. And we tried a few times to take it off to see if we could try some different things. And I mean, girls were pretty much crying because they were, oh, my omelets, And it's that same thing with the chowder. The times that they try to take the chowder, I'll give them a heads up. I'll say, you don't want to take the chowder? We've seen this before. Oh, we'll just try it. And it's a real upsetting thing to a lot of our students who have been here for a few years to come in here on a Friday and not see the chowder. Big Dick's chowder. Marinara sauce. We were still making Big Dick's marinara sauce. Yeah, I know that one. Here's something called the 322. We did a lot of things with numbers, but a 322, 3 cases of crushed tomatoes. So these are 6 number 10 cans. Cans are about 3 quarts in each one. So 6 of those in a case, 3 cases, and then 2 cases of tomato puree, big old cans like that. And tomato puree is just a little bit thicker. And then 2 cans of tomato paste to really tighten things up. We used to start by opening all those cans. So 322 was what you had to remember of 3 of these, 3 cases of these, 2 of these, and 2 cans of this. And then the vegetables that went in it were onions and peppers and carrots. Okay. See, tomatoes have a lot of acid, and people put a lot of sugar in to counteract that acid. You can use carrots in the beginning, cook it down with the other vegetables. Peppers and onions are pretty traditional in there. Ground up very fine in a machine called a buffalo chopper, very much like a food processor, old-fashioned kind of one, really kind of cool. You grind that up, those vegetables up fine, and you start those in the bottom and cook those down, and then add in the tomatoes, and those carrots help to sweeten and take the acid. That ratio is way back when I was a kid. I used to have to open those cans for him, and then he'd build the sauce. When I was a pot washer, I'd wash all my pots, and then I'd sit myself down on a table, and I'd watch what they were doing. And he'd say, you, get over here, come here, and it'd make me cook. And that's how I learned to cook.
J.R. remembers Dick's love of baking and his excellent butchering skills. When J.R. decided to attend culinary school, Dick made sure he was learning more than book knowledge.
You could take the same cut of meat, not know what he knows, and the things that he taught me, and when you go to cook it in the end, cut it and cook it, you don't get the same steak that I get. You get a tougher, less quality piece of meat because it wasn't cut the right way and handled properly. I can remember learning about boning out a lamb leg. So what we did is we used to buy our lamb legs in boneless. He said, I'm getting our lamb legs with bone in. You'll learn to bone them out. And I'd bone out 20 every time we had lamb. To be able to say, they'd teach me this. And sometimes you'd say, yeah, that's right. And it'd show it to you again and say like this. And make sure that what they showed you was what he wanted you to know. And other times you say, what, are you crazy if you did that? And it'd tell you exactly why you don't want to do what they said. And a lot of it had to do with budget. He really did love to bake. And he didn't get to during the school year. We had a baker here. But in the summer, when things were mellow, he would go over there and bake. And he had an allergy, it seemed, to flour. He'd sneeze a pretty good amount over there, but he really enjoyed it. And so that was one of his favorite things.
Vicky on baking.
And he was an absolute great baker, too. He baked my kids all kinds of cookies and cakes, and they were all fabulous. not from a mix either. He really enjoyed baking, I think because he didn't get to do it as much.
We'll be right back. For more interviews and related content, you can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, and other podcast distributors. Also, check out our website at www.fredopie.com. Ask questions on Facebook at Frederick Douglass Opie and on Twitter at Dr. Fred D. Opie. For information about advertising on the show, please email us at fdopie@gmail.com. That's fdopie@gmail.com.
Hey listeners, if you're enjoying this episode, check out the interview Fred did with Babson professor Amir Reza. They talk about food in post-war Iran, and it's available on the Dinner Table show page.
First time I tasted yogurt that was sweet, I almost honestly threw up because I was expecting savory, and I get this really sweet taste, and I'm like, what was that? Peanut butter did not exist, for example, when they have it now, but the first time I tasted peanut butter, I thought it was awful, the worst thing. So the quick thing that we'd have is called noon or paneer sabzi. So noon is bread, paneer is cheese, usually like a feta cheese, and sabzi means greens, but it's usually herbs. So you in fact now it's a very humble meal, but it's something really, really almost every household knows about, and I love it.
Now back to the show. I grew up the child of a Sing Sing prison guard in New York's Hudson Valley. My dad worked overtime at the prison as frequently as 4 days a week to provide for his wife and 3 boys. In addition, as an entrepreneur, he ran a cleaning business on the weekend that I have come to affectionately call Opie & Sons. Much of my drive and work ethic comes from what I learned working with my dad on the weekends and observing him rack up overtime hours at the prison. Similarly, Dick Roussel had been a hard-working guy, but unlike my dad, he had a career that he loved and it paid the bills. Dick worked 40-hour-plus weeks at Babson throughout the academic year and moonlighted at Wellesley Country Club across the street from the Babson campus and at other locations. J.R.
He used to do a side gig over at the Wellesley Country Club. This guy would come here at 6 o'clock in the morning, 5 or 6, depending on the day. He used to do the baking in the summertime, too. And then he'd leave here at 3 o'clock in the afternoon or so and go over to the Wellesley Country Club, cut their meat, and do whatever they needed around the kitchen until whenever they sent him out of there. He worked.
Dick also held down a job as a chef at a summer resort on Cape Cod, which his daughter Vicky remembers fondly.
When he started working at Babson, he had the summers off initially. So for the summer, he would go and work at a resort. One was in Sebago Lake, and the one that I remember is the big old Cape Cod Hotel, which no longer exists in Falmouth, Mass. It was a big old-time resort where they had meals 3 times a day and a big, beautiful pool. And so he was in the kitchen all day long cooking these outrageous meals. So the people that owned this massive, beautiful hotel furnished us with a home in Falmouth to live in all summer long. So I was so spoiled. My mom and I would hang out either at the beach or at this beautiful pool at the resort while my father worked. And I would get to see him, when he had a break. He knew everybody and everyone loved him. He was such a people person. He just loved everybody. He got along with everyone. And also he worked at the Wellesley Country Club, too. He was definitely a workaholic. He worked so much when I was growing up. I rarely saw him. He would work at Babson and then he would moonlight at night for maybe 4 or 5 nights a week. So he would leave in the morning at maybe 5 o'clock, come home until 11 o'clock at night. And this was probably 5 nights a week. And he worked very hard to provide for our family. My mom didn't work. He is one of the few people that I know that absolutely adored his job. I mean, it was kind of the love of his life.
What was it like to be the chef's daughter as a student at Babson College?
I would always come in the back, through the kitchen door and have lunch in his office so I could visit with him. And I'd follow him around the kitchen. And this was even before I was accepted into Babson. I would come and visit him. And there were many a day when I was having a tough day, and I would just follow him around the kitchen and talk to him He'd be drinking his coffee out of his mug. The radio would be playing. No matter what he was doing, he would have time to sit down with me and talk to me about whatever was going on. For me, because I didn't see him that much when I was growing up, having him here really helped me through the college experience. I cherish it because I spent so much time with him. He made it known that I was his daughter. He would drag me around and introduce me to professors and students. And the funny thing was, I mean, I really had to behave myself on campus because my father was always there in the morning. He gave me so much confidence. At a time when, you know, when you're just out of high school, it's hard to know what you're doing and where you're going. And he always believed in me. And I think that's probably one of the reasons I ended up being successful in trying so many things, because he would say, just go for it. You know, give it your all. You can do it.
He cared. There's an old saying that people don't care what you think until they know that you care. In a number of ways, Dick said in word and deed that he cared about the Babson students. Again, J.R.
Dick would fight for the kids to get good quality food, but he wasn't going to waste anything because that was cutting into his budget. So, you know, he knew there was budget constraints, didn't love it, but knew it, and he would make sure that everything that was spent wisely. So the kids got as much as they possibly could. You know, I don't know how many kids knew how much he cared, but obviously plenty of them figured it out. He cared about them. It was very easy to see that he cared about them. And he was a great chef. And people love food. It's easy to get attached to someone who can make good food. Where food has come a long way in the years in a college. Back then, typical college food it just wasn't great. Like Army food, let's say. But he always took the time to do a little bit more than he had to make it nicer for his customers. And he didn't care that he had been in restaurants prior to that, but he didn't care that his customers were college students. He treated them like any other customer, and they got great food. And then his personality was a lot of fun.
Babson alum, Marty Johnson.
He was warm and friendly and welcoming to everyone. He knew everyone's name. The trim wasn't like it is now. It was just one food line with 2 hot meals, and then you had your sandwich bar and your salad. But the one thing about Dick, which just couldn't possibly happen at this day and age, was he'd make anything you want. You know, you'd go in and you didn't like what was there. You could walk out back and say, Dick, what do you need today, honey? He'd make me a fried egg sandwich any time of day, whether the cafeteria was open or not. He made us feel home.
Again, Dick Roussel.
He was so ahead of his time in terms of cooking, being culturally sensitive to all the students. This was way before we had different food bars and allergies. And on certain holidays, he would cook special things for the students, and he would have them on a table in the kitchen so that if the students didn't want to eat in the cafeteria, they would come out back and eat what he had for them. And there was always a special table, like all the Jewish holidays. He always wanted to make sure that everyone got something to eat.
Dick Roussel's most noted culinary innovations at Babson had to be his food specials, particularly steak night on Saturdays. Wright and Johnson.
I met him when he first got there, early in the fall of '69. The whole experience there got better after he got there. Always a big hit. It was always steak night. Yeah, everybody came for that.
Saturday nights were steak. Dick would be out in the back of the grill.
Alumni Chris Brown remembers his work-study job on steak night. He had gained Dick's confidence to the point in which Dick allowed him to man the grill. Brown, a hardcore carnivore, couldn't believe he was getting paid to cook his favorite food. Chris Brown.
You know, he'd started taking me out back Saturday nights so I'd work with him out there, and he taught me an incredible lot about how steaks have to be. In that, it was a whole learning process. He loved taking people new and kind of teaching them. So I kind of think Saturday nights working there, you're getting paid to run around with steaks, and that was a big night to make people happy.
Wright and Johnson.
A couple of times a year, we'd have lobster.
And in the springtime, he would do a barbecue outside sometimes.
We used to have 6 or 8 different kinds of ice cream and all the toppings on Sundays. It was just a Sunday bar on Sundays. That was fabulous.
It's not clear when it started or when it ended, but in the late 1960s, Babson students practiced entrepreneurship in action as the managers and employees of campus businesses, many of them food businesses. This Babson of the past reminds me of how the Southern educator Booker T. Washington operated Tuskegee Institute in Tuskegee, Alabama. Students there went to school on a comprehensive work-study program in which they took coursework and simultaneously acquired skills working on campus as farmers, cooks, carpenters, masons, tailors, and seamstresses in training. Ann Heller had been a member of the first class of female students at Babson in the late 1960s. She remembers student-run concessions. Ann Heller.
So I came in the fall of 1968. In those days, we had student businesses. A lot of the campus was run by student businesses. Our food service was independently run at the time. There was a student food place. It was called the Dry Dock, and it was a snack bar. But they had fast food service. They made hamburgers, hot dogs, sandwiches, and it was student run. And it was a very, very lucrative business, and the license sold. It was a commodity, that business. And in those days, student government was very powerful because we managed all the licensing for all these student businesses. Wow. There were couple of different catering companies, and it was very interesting.
Dan Wright.
The Dry Dock was full-service snack bar, friolators, grill, and everything else. It was student-run. I worked there. At lunchtime it was very busy because it was either students and/or faculty. Deli sandwiches, burgers, kind of a diner. No alcohol, but it was student-owned and student-run.
A coveted job on campus to be working at that place?
Convenience was a big factor, and there were enough people that actually worked there, so you had some flexibility if you needed it. I think the Dry Dock was, a bit of a meeting place, a place to, drop in, hang out, grab a snack, or grab something. It was an alternative to the dining hall that you.
Creek life and student-run concessions had been an integral part of the Babson experience during Dick Roussel's tenure at Babson. Again, Dan Wright.
Greek life was fairly extensive. The members that were part of the fraternities, their social life was really dominated by the fraternity. That was where you kind of hung out between classes or afterwards, social scene on weekends, etc.
Marty Johnson explains the link between Dick Roussel and Alpha Kappa Psi.
AK was a force on this campus. I mean, AK ran all the dominating businesses. AK was the majority of the social committee, the best parties. You really didn't go about your day without encountering something that Alpha Kappa Psi didn't have their fingers in. It was the connection with Big Dick. Maybe more than half of the student staff at Trim were AK. Dick got to be friendly with them. We were the business fraternity on campus, and we worked all the businesses on campus. To be a force on campus, you had to be associated with them. We ran the concessions at the soccer. Sat up on Saturday mornings and got the grills and did the cooking and served the food, sold the food. That was our business. During final exams, we sent letters home to all the parents and guilted them into buying a fruit basket for their kids, and we delivered them. Chinese food delivery, that was our pledge class. Our pledge brothers did Some Young Guy Chinese food delivery every term. So on weekend nights, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, I think it was, maybe Sunday, you could call one of our phones and we would take an order. I was one of the order takers, and we would run out to Jade Island and Jade Pacific and pick up Chinese food and deliver it to your room. We'd run out and pick up your order and bring it back and deliver it for a fee. Everything we did was a moneymaker. Dick was in support of anything we needed. He became an honorary brother. They actually brought him into the brotherhood a couple of years before I got there, and he just relished that. He loved it. He never missed a ceremony.
Vicky Roussel.
He has an AK hat and he has an AK shirt. He wore them more than he wore anything else. He loved the fraternities. He loved them. I mean, he loved the sororities too. He was a great guy and open-minded, but you could always go talk to him, and I think the kids just felt comfortable with him.
What role does food play on a college campus? Great food on a college campus improves community morale and pride in the institution. care and extra effort from the food service staff also creates positive student and staff memories about a college campus. Particularly on a campus like Babson, in which there is one student cafeteria known as TRIM. Babson alum, Marty Johnson.
It is your source of nourishment. I mean, you just, unfortunately, most kids don't pay that much attention to that, at least they didn't when I was in school. It's a place to go for comfort. It's a place to go for quiet respite. It's a place to get away from the partying, the studying, it's a central focus of the campus, especially since there's only one.
I don't know if the Babson executive chefs know whose shoulders they're standing on, but hopefully listening to this podcast will give them a sense of the history of TRIM and the people who have made it work. Babson alumni stories about Chef Dick Roussel and the businesses they operated while attending school reminds me of a vision I had. A school where undergraduate and graduate students do internships, work study, and study in incubators as part of their educational experience in their neighboring communities. Babson cooperative businesses could reduce student fees and expenses for food, refreshments, licensed goods, personal training, a credit union, and financial information, etc. Students, faculty, staff, and alum could collaborate on business ideals. A Babson business on and off campus could provide the perfect incubator for which to test new products and marketing concepts. It could allow the students an opportunity to employ their coursework in what I would call a class-to-cash business. What do you think? Please share your ideas in our comment section and rate our podcast on platforms where you listen to and/or download our podcast. To check out our podcast archive, suggest show topics, and advertise on the show, and to book me as a guest and/or speaker, visit our website, www.fredopie.com. That's www.fredopie.com. For information about advertising on the show, please email us at fdopie@gmail.com. That's fdopie@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and be good.